Welcome back to the Laura Show. I'm with a great guest today, Sarah Eder. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I always kind of start these things with telling people about why I met someone or why I wanted to have them on the show. And we met just a couple months ago. You actually invited me and my colleague to come and speak to a room full of investors. It was an event that you were putting on. And upon meeting you, I showed up to the event. I didn't know much about it. I knew what I was speaking about, but I didn't know kind of the context of the event. And meeting you there, I was like, there's something about this girl. I don't know what it is. You just, when you just meet someone, you just kind of know, like there's someone's up to something. Yeah. And my whole point of this show is to kind of bring the microphone to those people who are doing great things either in their community, they have great stories, or they're really trying to inspire and help people to build something. And so that's really why I wanted to have you here.
Thanks so much. It was so fun having you guys. And yeah, it was such a fun event. I enjoyed it.
So why don't you, let's just start getting right into it. Tell me about where you're at now career-wise. What are you up to?
Yeah. Okay, so I am now in my 5th year as a full-time real estate investor. So I have my own real estate firm, and I basically focus on Golden Horseshoe. We do multifamily conversion projects, a little bit of flips, a little bit of Airbnb, but the core part of our business is working with capital partners and acquiring like apartment buildings and multiplexes.
So why the event? Because that was more educational for other investors, right? Are you coaching or what's going on there?
Yeah, so about 4 years ago, I started my coaching business. Okay. And I'm really just like passionate. Like I'm a millennial. I got into real estate not very long ago. And I was just inspired by the full stories of millennials not being able to own houses and that generational wealth gap. And so, I really fell into coaching. And now, for 4 years, I've been coaching students just on how to raise money, how to do it creatively with maybe, they don't have mom and dad's money or they don't have a big salary themselves, how to kind of like just dive into real estate investing and get started.
Yeah. Okay, so I noticed on your Instagram as well, it says like millennial realtor or a millennial investor, I should say, excuse me, which really caught my eye because I too am a millennial, although I know we span, like now the oldest millennials are pushing 40 here. But yeah, like I remember like in my early 20s, people were like, millennials are entitled, they're never going to amount to anything, they're not going to be successful. And at the same time, prices of homes were going up really across North America and probably the world, but like particularly in the Greater Toronto area, we really started seeing things shoot up, which kind of killed that dream, right? I don't know if you had the same dream growing up where it was like, the house with the white picket fence, right?
A big yard.
Yeah. So something about that was like, okay, I want to kind of tackle this myth and see what I can do. Or like, what kind of like got your foot in the door with investing?
Yeah. So it was really interesting because I did not come from a life of real estate at all. I had a business degree, but I was actually a professional athlete for the majority.
You were a professional athlete? Oh my God, we got to go into that. But sorry.
Yeah. No, definitely a cool backstory for that because it definitely is like the segue into how I got into real estate because I retired when I was 26. Most athletes, we start really young. And so I've been doing this for like decades basically at that point, and I was kind of tired of it. And, here I am, 26-year-old with a business degree that I had never used. I'm an entry level and I was way behind my peers and I had a really hard time. I was like, I'll just take anything. I just need corporate experience and need something for my resume. And I ended up getting a job with a property management company. Didn't really care what it was at the time. Like it was just something, and I thought, okay, like it fits my skills. It's a bit of sales, it's a bit of organization, data entry. And so that's basically how my love for real estate got started. Not so much the property management because it's a lot of work, but it was the people, the building owners, like watching them grow wealth. And a lot of our clients were like police officers and teachers. I had this misconception that you had to be a multimillionaire to own real estate, not realizing that there's a lot of average people who invest and become multimillionaires. So it was just like a huge mindset shift.
It's so interesting because I'm currently helping do a 10-week program, a course where we're teaching real estate agents some sales tactics. And we talk about becoming an investor savvy realtor and working with investors. And the first thing that people often say to us is, well, there's not a lot of investors out there. That seems like too niche a market. And those people are too wealthy and I don't know them. So it's interesting because you bring that up too, less from the realtor side, but it goes to show that there are a lot of misconceptions around real estate and home ownership or property ownership. And I say that specifically because I think a lot of people think that they do need to own their own home.
Yeah.
They have to own the home they live in, which is not the case.
Not true. Yeah.
Where did you start? Like, what was the first property then that you purchased?
Yeah, it was definitely not my primary residence. I only purchased my first like actual house a year ago. And I've been investing full time for like almost 5 years because we didn't believe that it was an asset. We put all of our money into, buying rental properties that cash flowed. So my first investment property was actually a student rental in Brantford. Yeah, we wanted something that was easy, single family home. It cash flowed really well. And I was able to do it with a joint venture partner. So that's something I'm really big on teaching about because, again, millennial, bad credit, no real income saved. I didn't have good T4 income because I just recently started working full time. And I partnered up with someone who had good credit, who had mortgageability, and we were able to partner together and do our.
How did you find that partner? Was it just like asking a bunch of people, finding like one of your friends?
Social media.
Social media.
So funny enough, I think because I was so young without a track record, the whole idea of like friends and family being the first ones you go to.
Yes.
Well, I always think that's a bit of a misconception too, because to this day, they're like, we'll wait till you make it. We'll wait till you make it. And it was only just a couple of years ago that friends and family actually started investing with me once they had seen like I had actually done something with it. So he was a stranger actually. And I'd met him through a mutual friend who was an agent in Brantford. I was all over social media. I was like trying to start up this YouTube channel to just gain some credibility and, visibility in the market. And yeah, we were connected and he was actually retiring from his real estate portfolio. So as someone young and ambitious like myself, we were a great fit because he just did not want to be involved with the day-to-day anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that you were working for a property management company. Yeah. How many deals in did it take before, like, at what point did you say, okay, I've made enough money doing this side hustle that I can end my career? Because a lot of people say, I'm going to become a real estate agent or I'm going to change my careers. And then, they go cold turkey. But the fear in that, of course, is now you're giving up your secure income. So what was it for you? Did you cut it off right away or?
So I didn't cut it off right away. I actually made like a small transition. So the property management was like really time intensive and I found, late night calls and, just really weird hours. And it was really hard for me to keep accelerating my real estate portfolio. So it was, I think, less about the money and all of that. What I did was I kind of did an interim. So I actually quit, became a project manager for actually a real estate team, which is interesting. And did that because I thought if I had corporate stability and a paycheck that like would be better. So I kind of went to the dark side.
Oh, okay.
I like started with the side hustle, probably should have kept with it. And then was like, no, I need more 9 to 5. I need more stability. I need this corporate paycheck because then I can qualify for mortgages and life would be easy. But then I found myself just back in that 9 to 5 grind where my life was just consumed by someone else's work. And so it actually took another 3 rental properties and a couple of flips. I did about 5 properties that next year where I said, okay, I have proof of concepts. I had just enough to kind of like put food on the table and pay the bills. And then the company ended up restructuring and I just gave my notice and left. So I did kind of like a half cold turkey.
So you kind of just something in your gut was telling you now's the time.
Now is the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I feel often, or at least I do this or I've done this, right? Like I'll have an idea. And then you kind of like flirt around and ask some people, like, what do you think of this? There is some negatives in doing so because other people, there's safety in the 9 to 5 job, right? There is a lot of security. You know what to expect, right? And then there's that like group of people who say, I just can't do it anymore. And so it is, I caution people to like go out and start telling the world. Sometimes you almost just have to be kind of quiet, keep to yourself because only you know what's best for yourself, right? So something obviously was telling you to like, time to go.
Yeah. I really felt stifled creatively. I felt like it was actually kind of funny. On lunch breaks, I would be out in the hallway, like with my contractors, like secretly on the phone. And my bosses knew something was going on. And they could tell like I was just very distracted from what I was doing. And I found so much excitement and passion in my real estate portfolio, and I didn't want it to be a side hustle anymore. But like you said, I mean, it's like it has to be the right time for you. If you have kids and you know, big responsibilities, sometimes just quitting your job cold turkey just isn't an option. And I was very fortunate. Like, I wasn't married at the time. We didn't have children. We were still living in a small condo. So we had very small expenses. And I think it was easy for me to just kind of go to my, you know, then boyfriend and say, hey, look, I'm going to quit my job and this is what we're going to do. And he, you know, God bless him, was like, go.
Did it take some convincing?
Definitely.
Yeah. So you like, did you have to like come up with like a business plan and say like, this is what I'm going to do? Yeah.
And he's a smart guy. So he was in grad school at the time. And that was actually one of the considerations, was he wasn't bringing in a lot of money. He was actively going through his first.
He was probably spending more money than he was bringing in.
Yeah, he was a TA, but I mean, they make measly, you know, income. And so he said, is this really the time? And I was trying to pitch him. It wasn't just real estate. It was this idea of using other people's money and joint ventures. He's like, you know nothing. You don't own hardly any real estate. Like, why are people going to trust you? How does this work? Why would they give you 50%? Why would they want to partner with you? And so I really had to pitch him more on my concept of how I was going to attract money partners, how we were going to keep scaling our portfolio, not having a lot of capital.
So you use social media, or what was like, that is true. Because if you're the money person or the mortgage person, to me, those are like the main thing. So how did you say like, no, I'm going to earn this 50%?
Yeah. You know, good old fashioned grit and hustle. So it was definitely social media. Like, it was a mixture of like all the hard work and education, but documenting it on social media. So I said, okay, if I don't have the money and I don't have the mortgageability, what are my partners lacking that I need to bring to the table? So I got really good at finding off-market deals, really good at deal analysis. I got really good at just in the market itself. Like, I started out with one market and one market only, and that was Brantford. So someone came to me and said, Sarah, there's a property on X, Y, and Z street for, you know, X number of dollars. What do you think? I could say right off the bat, that's a good deal or not. And so I just brought comfort to them, knowing that I had local contacts, I had property management experience, I had good contractors and realtors and people on my team, and I had such innate market knowledge that they just, you know, didn't have, like the money partners.
A lot of people get caught up in that, right? Like, oh, there's too much to learn. I got to educate myself. I don't know where to start. What was kind of like where you started with the education component? Because it can be so overwhelming.
It can be so overwhelming. So one thing I learned, just even as I continue to build and scale into bigger properties and developments and, you know, scary stuff, is it always starts with deal analysis. I think like if you can identify a really, really good opportunity, deal makers are probably the most rare thing out there, because there's always people kicking around with money and not a lot of education. There's always people that can do like labor and things, but it's being able to see between the lines. It's, you know, what makes this a good deal? How can we tweak this? How can we add value to these properties? And so I became really, really good at just identifying deals, analyzing them. And then the things I didn't know, I just brought in other professionals to support me, like financing, you know, mortgage specialists and realtors and contractors, because I knew nothing about construction. I knew nothing about refinancing, but I surrounded myself with like the titans in the industry that could kind of like back me up in those areas.
It's interesting. We talk a lot in our real estate business about like making a really great team, right? Like your dream team of people. You never have to be the expert on anything. And I feel like you obviously have done that very well.
Definitely.
You mentioned earlier about property management, not that you were working for a property management company, but you know, that some of these things like student housing, for example, which was your first purchase, would take a property manager, I assume, to help. A lot of people are fearful of the amount of work and effort involved. I actually personally, I have my principal resident, and then I own 2 pre-construction condos that haven't closed. And I think I've gravitated toward pre-construction because I have this thinking in my mind that dealing with tenants would be, and you know, the faucets breaking and anything like that, because I'm not handy either, that feels overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Was that not something that you were like, I don't know what I'm doing? Like, I can't possibly find tenants. I don't know, because you're not a real estate agent either. So it's like, I can at least go find the tenants. I know how to do that. But you're like literally doing it all yourself. So I'm curious, like that probably would have stopped me in my tracks, I'm thinking, with something specifically like a student housing.
Oh, definitely. So you know what? I am such a big proponent of like you can't learn until sometimes you just go and you do it. And I also was like, I was a member of, RAIN and a lot of these like big mentorship, like real estate groups. And I used to religiously go, every single month to every single like real estate education class I could, learning about all these tactics, because often they would give you good tips on like how to screen tenants and how to select the right markets and how to run, cash flow analyses. And so I had all these workbooks, and I was just every night after work, just, editing and putting together all these notes and just having probably about 75% of it. And then the other 25% was kind of just giving it a go. And I guess in my mind, I was like, okay, like what's the worst that's going to happen? Like I have good lawyers and I have good mortgage brokers and I have people that I can bounce ideas off of, and I contractors and things. So let's just
let them do their job, right? Yeah. Okay, interesting. That's an interesting mentality that this is not supposed to be real estate podcast. And I know that that's obviously a big part of your story, which is why I kind of wanted to touch on it first. But what I really want to touch on is going backward. Yeah. See, like, who was Sarah growing up? Like, how did you get that mindset of being like, I guess let's just try it out? I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, it had something to do with you being a professional athlete. I'd like to hear about that story and what you did and how'd you get into that? And
absolutely. And, you're totally right, because, sometimes when I'm even like coaching my students, they're so fearful about things that I myself, I'm like, who cares? Just do it, and they're like, like I'm so scared to go on social media and put myself out there. But for me personally, so I was always an athlete. Like I'm quite tall for my age and athletic. So I was just,
how tall are you? I'm
5'8". So pretty tall for a girl.
I'm not even scratching 5'1", so yeah.
To be fair, there's a benefit sometimes of not being.
I pretty much had gymnastics. If I wasn't going to make it in gymnastics, it wasn't happening. Or figure skating, maybe. But yeah. So 5'8", okay.
So they put me, ballet, basketball, volleyball, like you name it. And I hated all of them. I was not very coordinated. And although being athletic, I just didn't really enjoy that kind of like roughhousing and stuff that you kind of experience in like, let's say basketball or soccer, for example. So my parents pushed me in it, and, I was like, no, like I'm not having this. So I was about 12 years old, and I went to a friend's birthday party, and she had ponies. It was like one of those like horseback riding, like adventure things. And I thought, I was terrified. Like, I don't know who's not terrified of getting on a horse for the first time, but I thought, oh, like this is kind of cool. And I did it. And it was my first experience of like really overcoming like a massive, massive fear and really enjoying it. And I thought, oh, I connect with this animal. Like this is kind of interesting and fun. And so I went back from that. And I said, hey, Mom, like I want to take riding lessons. She's like, absolutely.
You're crazy. But of all the sports, that's probably one of the more expensive ones I think. Yeah.
So she's like, in time commitment. And I think she thought I was nuts. I was 12 or like 13. So she said, okay, we'll enroll you in like the local riding school. You can muck stalls on the weekends to pay for your lessons. And so she really like made me work and earn my keep, so to speak. And, she thought I would get over it by the time I was like 16. And I did not. If anything, I got more and more focused as the years went on. So by the time I was about 14, 15, I was already competing at the provincial level. And then my parents said, like she's not stopping. Like she wants to keep going. And they ended up, to scramble and get money. I wanted to go to national.
So this is horse jumping?
Horse jumping.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Or is that what you would call horse?
Yeah. We call it show jumping.
Show jumping. Yeah. So like the things where there's like multiple bars and like they have to jump.
Crazy version of equestrian sport.
Okay.
Because there's the version like dressage where you don't jump over anything, and it's
and they're the crazy. Are they doing this like the nice? Yeah, well, that's pretty too. Okay,
yeah. No, I was like speed demon. I want to jump big, obstacles on a horseback, which is kind of crazy. And I got pretty good at it. And we ended up, by the time I was 16, 17, I was going to nationals. And then at that point, I'm starting to think about college and university. And I was like, Mom, like I think I want to go like work for an Olympian. Like, I think I want to try to go to the Olympics. And she just went, I could just see our face was like, no, you're going to university. So we made a compromise. I still continued to compete at the national level while going to university full time.
Where'd you go to university?
In Michigan.
Oh, in Michigan. So you were training there?
I was training.
Okay. So you got a scholarship?
I did. But riding at that time was out of pocket. They didn't have like a barn at the university.
Okay.
But as long as I stayed
If you went to Guelph, they probably
I would have loved, yeah, because they actually have like a training, like a competitive league at Guelph. So,
Yeah.
but I was actually born and raised in Sault Ste. Marie. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I was actually closer to go to Michigan,
Yeah.
believe it or not. So, yeah, so that's kind of what I did from then until my mid-20s. I got to university, had the option to go to grad school and possibly go to law school, which is where my professors wanted me to go. And I said, I'm still so young, like I want to give it a go. Like I have one shot at this. Let's do it. And so from, the next 6-7 years, I was in Europe, in the US, and working for various, Olympic trainers and things like that. Never made it to the Olympics myself.
Okay.
Because I just realized sometimes dreams need to be just.
Yeah. Did you try out for them? Like, were you, like you didn't make it?
Yeah. Like I was on the path.
Sorry, I'm bringing up old wounds.
No, it's okay. You're right. Like, and that was a time of my life that was very like heartbreaking, because when you have 15 years of your life into something and lots of money and time and energy, you expect to get to that goal. And I was just about the point where I could have started to qualify for the trials, because it's like you have to qualify for like provincial, then national, then trials, and like there's a huge like list of things you have to kind of go through. And I also didn't have the financial backing either. You start to realize that once you get to the Olympic level, like you're pumped all money and hills all the time. Yeah. And I looked at it and I said, I didn't enjoy the politics and the sponsorship getting, and it turned my love of horses into this big corporate setup, and that wasn't what I liked.
I just put my card down because there's nothing on it about this, because I didn't know this about you. Yeah. So this has now steered my conversation in a different direction. For people who are watching and listening that like who know me, they probably know whenever I get asked on a podcast, like, what if you could do anything, what would you be? I'm always like, I'd be an Olympian. Like as a kid, there's nothing I wanted more than to be like a gold medalist at the Olympics for my country. I guess I was a very like patriotic kind of kid growing up. And everyone's like, oh, what sport? I'm like, any sport, like just anything, just something. And then so to sit with someone who obviously got so close is pretty cool. So it's funny how like your life kind of, puts people together and puts people around you. Okay, so things obviously don't go to plan. And I hear that often too, right? Where people will say, well, I love knitting. And then, people will say, well, you should start a knitting company, like make some money. And then it's like, but I love it too much. I don't want like the politics of it, or not the politics of knitting, those knitting politics, but more like the politics of business and selling and things like that. So you're like, okay, I'm going to let this dream die. That was hard.
So hard.
Yeah. Like some tearful night.
I was lost. I literally felt like
because you had spent a decade of your life focused to this one thing, not really thinking about your future other than this probably. What do you do? Like what do you wake up one day and you're like, hey, we got to just like pick up?
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. Like at that time, I was actually working in Florida for actually a female Olympian. She's one of the top female riders in the U.S., probably like the world, to be honest. It was like my dream. It was like the pinnacle of my career. But I had not a great show season that winter, and things were just kind of falling apart. And so I decided, like, we had a break. So usually the Florida season, it's like we're snowbirds. We go down there and train for the winter and then come back to Canada or the US in the summer, like in the Midwest. So I decided to go home for a little bit, visit my parents. I hadn't seen them for like 6 months. And I thought, okay, I'll take a month off and just kind of see where I'm at. And, I had a really long talks with my parents. And I said, like, guys, like, is this it? Like, am I done with this now? And they said, well, what about just doing it on your own? Like, what if you had your own training facility? Like, maybe the pressure of the Olympics just killed the dream for you. And so I did a very short stint where I actually had my own stables for a little while, and I decided to kind of like dial it back. So I wasn't competing anymore, but I was training young riders and training young horses, selling horses, kind of like flipping houses a little bit, which was
such a flipping TV show.
Yeah, very lucrative.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
And I enjoyed it a lot. But again, I did that for a couple of years and then got to a point where to your point, like you were saying, it's like I have like the bills and the accounting and the showing up. I didn't have a lot of staff helping me at the time, so I was there 7 days a week. I didn't have much of a social life, and by that point, I'm into my mid-20s, and I'm like, you start to go, okay, what's my next 15? Like, am I gonna get married? Like, am I gonna have kids? Like, how is this all gonna play? Like, I'm not traveling. I'm not enjoying the best, years of my life. And so I just kind of had that, I know a lot of people say midlife crisis, but I had 25 weeks.
Your quarter life crisis.
Crisis. I had this quarter life crisis, and that was the point where I had finally thrown in the towel, because I had just met my then, boyfriend, but now my husband. And he did not really like this whole idea of all the travel and the hours. Like, he was like, he didn't say you're better than this, as in he didn't believe that I could do it, but he could see me suffer and struggle with something I loved so much. And he's like, there's other things out there. Like, you can do this as a hobby. You can do this as something and turn it back into something you just
really enjoy.
A job. And it took me another year before I finally conceded. And then I definitely like eased my way out of it, because I couldn't do it cold turkey. So I went from 15, 20 horses in training down to 5, down to 1, and then finally sold my last horse in like 2018, I think.
That's that. So last horse, like, do you like have a relationship with each horse? I feel like I'm getting rid of dogs. I don't know if I could do it.
And he was mine. Like, that's why I kept him for so long. This last one was actually mine, and I had him since he was a baby.
What was his name?
Gold.
Oh, yeah. Come on. That's so perfect.
He was my Olympic hopeful. He was only 6 years old, and I had got him as a young horse to kind of, prep him to go to the Olympics. And he was at the age where he should have started, competing and starting to rank up and everything. And so it was like, I'm doing this horse also at a service, because he's very talented. And I'm like, he needs to go to a rider that can take him into his full potential. So it was bittersweet. And he's actually in Spain right now with a rider. He's so doing his big, he's been all over the world actually competing. And I've actually followed him on.
Oh, that's so sweet. Like, it's like you kind of were like, no, I have to let you spread your wings now. Oh, that's nice. What do you take from being in that competitive space into either investing into your career, into your life? Like, are you a competitive natured person where, like, you get up every day because you're like, I'm going to win? Are you kind of like that through and through, or no?
Definitely there is like a strong competitive streak. So definitely, like, I find I don't compete against other people so much as like myself, because I think maybe it's because I was never in a team sport, but a solo sport. Like, it's just me and the horse, right? So really, your biggest competitor is yourself. It's your mindset. And so every morning, when I was riding and competing, it was always like, how are you going to be better today? Yesterday you were too slow, or yesterday you made a mistake, or you did something with your horse and you had a miscommunication. So you're always analyzing yourself, like, very, very deeply. And so that I still carry to this day. Like, to your point, I wake up every morning like 6 a.m. and I'm like, how am I going to be better today? What am I going to bring to my business? How can I impact the people around me and just be a better business owner? So I'm very, very competitive against, I think, myself.
Interesting. Okay. So I guess I'm just telling the story for the sake of it. When I was a kid, so we had a pool growing up.
Yeah.
And, sometimes most of the time I'd have friends over, but obviously the kids had to go home for dinner, or like, my friends would go to camp and I wasn't at camp. So I had to like learn how to kind of like play with myself. So I would do these funny things where I would throw like diving sticks into the deep end, and I would time myself to see how quickly I could get all the diving sticks. But I made it like a mini Olympics. So at first I'd be like the Russian team, and then I'd be like the US, and then of course last was always Canada, and I always won. Like, Canada always won a gold medal. But it is kind of funny because it is that competing against yourself, and so often we look outward to think like, oh, I'm not as good as this person, or I'm not doing what this person's doing. But really, when it comes down to it, which I haven't really thought about until you sort of mentioned this, because I grew up ski racing, so that was an individual sport too. It really is. It's just you on the hill, right? Like, are you in the horse, jumping with the horse on the course. That's a tongue twister.
It is.
And it's about what you tell yourself, right? So sometimes I remember I'd be skiing and I'd be late on a gate. Only ski people would understand that probably, but you could tell you're falling behind. And then it's like, okay, pick back up. It's like what you tell yourself in the moment. And I think, unfortunately, if you didn't play sports for very long, or you weren't engaged in a lot of athletics, you don't necessarily have that part of your brain practiced to continue to tell yourself. And you have to do that every day. Like the amount of things that I say to myself that are negative that I have to quickly say no, and to catch yourself. And sometimes I don't catch myself very quickly, and it takes sometimes days. And you're like, wow, I let myself fester in that for days.
Yeah.
But the times where it's like, no, 90 seconds, like go to the bathroom, do whatever you got to do, look in the mirror, or like just have a moment of silence, write something down on a piece of paper that's positive, that's reinforcing to you, because it's you, it's your own life, it's you against yourself. So I think that's a really important lesson. I'm glad that you learned that at like such a young age.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fast forward now to kind of where we're at now. You obviously are successful, like from the outside looking in, but of course everyone has their own definition of that. Yeah. Do you feel that way about yourself? Like, what was the point where you said, I'm going to start teaching and helping other people do this? I imagine it takes a bit of like, I've kind of nailed this, I could teach it now.
Yeah.
To want to do that.
That's actually so funny, because I, for the longest time, had the biggest imposter syndrome. And maybe it was because I came from a sport that I had dedicated like so many years to, that, you know, and I was like so disciplined and so focused on just that one thing. And I definitely carried that over to my real estate portfolio. But maybe like I identified as this equestrian athlete, and I was so proud of all my accomplishments. And going into real estate, I just felt like this fumbling little kid that was just like trying to figure it out like step by step. And I think especially because like real estate is, I feel like, quite dominated by older people that have like been in it, you know, again, 10, 15 years, they've got that proof of concept, they've got all this experience. And I'm just this, you know, 27, 28 with an energy just like, oh, like I'm going to figure it out. Yeah. And so, no, like I keep sometimes like asking myself, like, when have I made it? Like, am I happy with where I am? And then I think it was only about a year ago that I finally just said, you know, you have to just be okay with the journey. Like, it's not always about how many properties you own or how much net assets you have under management or how many partners you have, you know. And like, I think I did get kind of sucked into the idea of maybe comparing myself to others a little bit. So,
well, and you start hanging out with groups of other investors now, and everyone's like, well, I got 10 properties, I got this, right? You probably start thinking like, oh shit, I only have little measly ones.
That's right. Yeah. So it definitely took me a very long time before I truly felt like accomplished and proud, even though it probably should have been years ago. Because I mean, I started my portfolio from absolutely nothing, using other people's money with not a lot of like, you know, practical skill sets besides that discipline and drive that I had from, you know, my athletic career. And in terms of coaching, like, it was really interesting because it was a girlfriend of mine that actually encouraged me to do it. So, you know, she had started a coaching program, and I was so just in admiration of her. And, you know, she was another millennial woman coaching in the real estate space. There wasn't a lot of that like 5-6 years ago. And I really admired her. And she said, well, why don't you start to host some webinars? And I had been investing full time for about a year and a half. And I said, like, no, like, I don't have that much experience. I only have so many doors and that. And she said, but look at what you've done from scratch. Like, you've been raising capital. And I was very proficient on social media in particular, which is, in my opinion, kind of like a newer medium that a lot of the old guys in real estate weren't really utilizing. They were still doing you handwritten like letters and old school stuff.
So there was an opportunity there that your youth actually was working in your favor.
My favor.
Yeah, and you were probably already using social media for yourself, like personally.
I knew how to use Facebook and Instagram.
So you use your millennialness, if that's a word, to help you. Imposter syndrome, this comes up in a lot of my conversations. It comes up a lot with women, and I don't know if women are just more inclined to talk about it. So maybe if I have some male guests on, I can learn more from them. But until that happens, I have you to talk about more your experience with it. I feel personally, because I never really heard of the term imposter syndrome until about a year and a half ago. And then as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, I have that. Like, I have that every single day. I'm at work trying to, you know, helping people buy real estate. Some of them, a lot of them are men in their 50s who are explaining life to me, you know, through their own lens, of course. And they're obviously educated, experienced. They're talking to me about the last time a recession hit, which I was like, I don't even remember that. Yeah. So there's a lot of moments where I feel I shouldn't be in this room. If someone asks me a question, I'm going to get outed. Like, it reminds me of being in school. Like, the teacher's like, hey, Laura, you're doing the next question on the board. And you're like, I didn't do my homework. Which is why I always did my homework, because I was like, never out me. I don't want to get outed. Yeah. Do you think it ever truly goes away, or you just put yourself in other situations and now you're an imposter in that new situation?
Truly, like, given my real estate trajectory going from student rentals to now doing, like, we just did like a 90 unit like apartment building, you would think, people probably looking outside would be like, wow, like, this girl's got it.
Yeah, that sounds complicated.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a huge shift in a short period of time. And I still am like, inside sometimes, like, am I really worthy of this? Like, am I capable of doing this? Have I actually made it? And so I don't think it actually ever truly goes away. But I do think that the more you believe in yourself, like, the more you take risks for yourself, and the more you prove to yourself that you can overcome adversity over time, even if you still feel like an imposter, you at least can tell yourself, like, but I can do better. Like, I can overcome.
Yeah, you kind of have experiences to go back on to say, well, I did that. And I say this a lot to women, particularly who want to be on camera and they can't get over the fear of being on camera. And it saddens my heart, because I just know that if they try and they put in the reps, they'll get it. And it reminds me of like a kid on a diving board, right? Yeah. Like, and a lot of women who have kids know this, because they're trying to teach their kid to swim. They're like, just jump. And they're like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And the kid is terrified, and they're like this far off the water, like nothing bad's going to happen. But they're so scared. And then they do it. When they finally get the courage and do it, and then their head comes up out of the water, they're like, oh my God, did you see that? Yeah. Right? Versus sometimes there's, unfortunately, the kid that backs off the diving board and won't do it. And you think, as probably a parent or someone watching, you're like, oh my God, if you just did it, like, But for some reason, as we get older, it's like we lose that sense of curiosity of what we're capable of. I wonder, right? Like, as a kid, it's like, am I capable? Can I do it? And we do that throughout life. That's why we sit and like practice shooting basketball outside, because we're like, can I beat my older brother and his friends at basketball? At least for me, like, I would just practice out of the, I wonder. And it, anyone who's watching or listening to this, I just hope that, like, it's like, take that step, like, just see, like, say, am I capable of this thing that I think I'm not, or that people think I'm not, or that I think people think I'm not? Most of the time, a lot of those things are just voices in our heads. People are cheering you on, right? Rarely are people like, what you probably found out, no one was like, oh, you shouldn't be here. You only have 3 doors, right? You thought people were thinking that, but did anyone actually ever say that?
Nobody ever thought that. And surprisingly, I know a lot of people get like nervous about social media too. And they're like, oh, like, your DMs must be terrible. And I'm like, no, like, my DM section looks like a cheering squad, particularly women, thank you so much for your inspirational message. Like, thank you so much for like what you share with the community. And it's so cool, because it's like, I remember when I was too scared. When I was starting my YouTube channel, I used to sweat buckets. I had like a script, and I was so terrified. Like, I was like, don't put me on camera, don't do it. And I think back and it's like, can you imagine if I had never done that? And like, now all these people that are like, hey, like, you've changed my life by like the stories that you share and like the motivation you give to the community, like, that's such a waste. And like you said, there's probably so many women out there with so many beautiful like messages and like stories to share that aren't being heard by the.
Yeah, we always have this thing where we're saying, like, go find a negative message and then like do a video comment back, or like, not a mean video comment back, like, thanks so much for this feedback, like, address it. And then people say, well, Laura, go find me one. And sometimes it is hard to find them. Like, I do think the majority of people, because it's not like you and I are like celebrities where people are just trolling us. Yeah, like, it's most of the people who are following me are in my community, and they want to see me win. And I think it's surprising that women sometimes think women aren't very supportive. I actually think, for the most part, women are very supportive. There's always a couple bad apples, of course, but like, I just think it's such an interesting community. And once we tap into like the power of ourselves. Now I'm getting a little bit like, no, foo-foo, but you know, we're capable of a lot. So now, so you're married. You had mentioned that before we started, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, just coming up on a year in April.
Oh, okay. Well, congrats on year number 1. I think I'm coming on year 9. You start to lose count.
Yeah, after that, yeah,
Faster and faster. What does your husband do now?
So he is a psychotherapist, actually.
Oh,
Yeah, so we're on like opposite ends of the spectrum. We basically laugh that I'm like the corporate capitalist machine and he's out there saving lives and, you know, helping people.
that must make for some interesting conversations at night.
Absolutely. That's what I actually really enjoy, because some people say like, oh, well, don't you wish your husband was involved with real estate? And I say no, because when we come home at the end of the night, he brings so many like unique, like he's very much a scholar. He took a lot of research, like masters, like during his grad school. And I'm much more like have a very pragmatic kind of practical approach to things. So we have just really fun debates, but I'm also really good at marketing and he's not. And so we really help each other in a lot of ways in our businesses too.
Well, that's kind of smart. My husband and I are both in real estate, so we just talk a lot about like clients and like, you know, similar issues. I mean, we sell different things, but asset classes. But that's so interesting. And I ask because, you know, I just want to touch on maybe some personal things a little bit, because oftentimes women will ask me like, or they'll say, you know, it's hard. Like, I'm married, I have kids, or I'm married, I also have to take care of the home. My husband doesn't seem to have to do that job. So it's kind of like I have my career and I have to do it. You know, this whole idea of balance, can we have it all? And I almost hate even bringing up the subject, because I know that I don't suspect a lot of men are asking that same question. They might be asking a question that's like around, I want more. You know, of course I want to be fit. Of course I want to make more money. Of course I want to shower my wife and let her stay home and be pampered. Like, you know, those things. So it's similar. It's just men talk about it, I think, a bit of a different way. What's your take on balance, having it all?
Yeah. It's so funny because I think as like young women, like we think that balance is a thing that, you know, yeah, we'll have the career and the kids and like the perfect life and we'll be all in like this perfect, you know, synchronized harmony. And then I think like a couple of years ago, a woman like a bit older than me basically just gave me like a wake up call, you know, and she's like, there is no such thing as balance. She's like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to be a strong CEO and you want a family and you want everything else, there's times when you're going to be a really, really good mother. And then there's times when you're going to be a really, really good CEO. And it's not going to be very often that you're going to be both at the same time. But the idea is that you recognize when you're kind of tipping maybe too far, like one way or the other, like you're kind of neglecting your business, or, you know, you're maybe not spending as much time with the kids, and that you just learn to just, you know, be the different kind of versions.
Is it acceptance, or like, do you still then strive? Are you still like I get it. Right now I'm focusing on this. I'm in this life stage.
Yeah.
But like, I still have to try to make it seem like everything's perfect. Like, do you, you know what I mean? Like, because sometimes I'm like, no, I get it. Balance is bullshit. I can buy into that. But then I go home and I'm still like, no, I have to be healthy and I have to like have my house clean and I have to like, I still am trying to have that perfect life.
Yeah.
Do you feel that pressure?
Absolutely. Like, I'm definitely not at acceptance yet at all, because I'm the same as you. Like, you know, even like last night, it's funny. Like, I came home and I was tired and I actually had to do some work, but then I'm like, oh, the kitchen's messy and the cleaner's coming tomorrow. So
The cleaner's going, so clean for the cleaner.
clean for the cleaner, empty the dishwasher and all that fun stuff. And my husband was out playing basketball with his friends or something like that. So, you know, I'm like, and mind you, he's excellent. Like, I think because he's a therapist, like he's very sensitive.
He's probably heard this story 1,000 times from other women. Like, why isn't this like you're being healthy?
Yeah. So he's excellent. He actually he likes a very clean house, so he contributes a lot. But I still feel like mentally, I'm like, okay, we need to get groceries. All right, this has to happen. All right, don't forget, like we have like your mom's birthday this weekend, and like I'm still carrying a little of the burden mentally of the household, and then thinking about having children in the future. I know, you know, I think it just kind of.
Yeah, you almost think, well, how am I even going to squeeze that in?
That's right.
If I already have this much burden. But somehow everyone figures it out.
Manage to just.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I feel like women, if we just kind of gave ourselves that acceptance, because I wonder if men just don't, like if they've just given themselves the okay. Like, it's okay. So the house looks like crap. Or we're like, the house looks like crap. If someone were here, they would judge me. But no one's even there. So why are we going through this turmoil in our minds? I don't know the answer. And I feel like you don't know the answer to, but we're here trying to figure it out, right? And that's, I think, to your point about it being a journey, is the hardest part to realize, because I can cognitively say I get it. It is about the journey. It's not the end destination, which was even hard for me to like come to grips with, because I was kind of like, get to the finish line and then it's done. Like, oh, I'm going to go to school and then I'm going to go to university, and it's always about like that next thing that I'm going to accomplish. So I can cognitively say now, yes, okay, it is about the journey. Do I always enjoy the journey? Like I wonder, I'm still on that, like, no, once I have this, it'll be better. You know? And so hopefully in my time on this podcast, I will have come up with the answers, or there are no answers. It's just the journey, and that's just coming to terms with it. So I appreciate you kind of dropping that scene. I don't think we've talked about, you know, the journey on the show before, which is an important thing to note. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you might want to leave the listeners with, either, you know, women in general, personally, professionally, real estate? The floor is yours. Oh, wow. Yeah, to put you on the pressure. Yeah.
Okay. Do my like TED talk now.
Honest, who doesn't want to do a TED talk though?
I know. Isn't that only
to bucket list? I know. So now's your chance.
By one chance. I would say that do not underestimate what you're capable of. Which I know is like very generic, but truly, you know, use my story if you have to, like, as an example, like if you need proof that things are doable. Because I didn't get so personal about talking about like my personal situation, but what it was like after, you know, my athletic career, that I was actually in a lot of debt. Like, horses are very expensive, and
sorry, this was when you owned all those horses as well.
Yeah, it's transitioning, you know, out into the real world, and you know, my partner's in grad school, not being, but he was still living with his mom at that time because he was like 28 or something, you know, and we were not good at all financially, and I was literally at a point where I did not think there was ever a chance I would own my own house, let alone as many homes as I own. I didn't think financial freedom was in my realm. Even just going on like a nice vacation, having a nice car, like, you know, all the like kind of trappings we say of success. Like, that was so far.
Sorry, and I know this is your wrap up, but like, and I didn't know to go here because I didn't know the story.
Yeah.
What was your confidence like about yourself at that time?
It was awful.
Yeah.
I didn't think, like, I was just trying to,
because some people might say, well, like, I'm not going to amount to anything and I'm okay with it. Right? And so I'm just like wondering where your headspace was. Yeah.
I was so miserable. Like, I will use that word. Like, you know, and I think everybody has to kind of get to this point where I was almost like, I imagined myself emotionally being like this pressure ball, where it was just like disappointment after like paycheck after defaulting on like car payments, to the point where I was so unhappy with my life that it was like, either, to your point, I just accept that this is how my life is going to be forever, or I have to do something about it. And it was a baby step, you know, like it was first like applying for that one job, and then it was, you know, even when I had the property management thing, I'll never forget my first real estate investor networking event. I went to Rain in Toronto. 300 people, knew not a single soul in that room, and I will never forget like walking in that door for the first time and what it felt like. Like, you want to talk imposter syndrome? I didn't have a property at that time. I was like, I spent my last couple of dollars to get here. I remember, like, I think I had to like call my mom to like help me with my credit card to pay for like the annual membership or something, you know. But I was like, Mom, no, like, this is going to be big. Like, I remember telling her, did you know there were so many investors, Mom? Like, in Toronto, there's like 400 people here. I didn't even know this many full-time real estate investors, like, that they existed. And I was like, I think I can do something with this. But that came after time, though. You know, in the beginning, I just felt like this kid that had nothing. I had no confidence in myself, but I just knew.
Were you excuse driven at that time? Because oftentimes people will be like in a hard place in their life, and then, you know, friends and family, like, they want to help, right? And they'll say, well, go take a course. Well, I can't because. Go do this. Well, I can't because and it's all the excuses. Were you doing that to yourself, like almost self-sabotage?
100%. And my biggest self-sabotage was my upbringing, because I didn't grow up with like money, and I didn't grow up, you know, I grew up with a lot of struggle. Like, although I was in the horse world, you know, I did it by shoveling for like a living, basically, and paying my way, right? So I knew what it was like to like really struggle and really like suffer financially. And so that was my inner thing, was that you're poor, your grandparents are poor, your parents are poor, like you're just poor. That's just who you are. Like I almost like identified with being poor. And I just kept myself in this self-perpetuating cycle. And so I look back at all the risks I didn't take and the things I told myself I couldn't have or I couldn't do because, oh, that's only for people with money, or you're poor, Sarah, like you don't belong in that room. Like you don't
Interesting how the way we define ourselves, because you had mentioned like I defined myself as a horseback rider. I defined myself as being poor.
Yeah.
How just something so simple as you saying that to yourself every day, it's like the smallest thing. It's one of, a million thoughts you have in the day, but how that definition of self can keep you pigeonholed. What was it that kind of like pushed you out of it?
I think like, strangely enough, it was like also like meeting my husband, because that was the first time, because, you think prior to that, I'm this like lone soldier on my way to the Olympics. I wasn't thinking about anything and anyone but me. And then all of a sudden now I'm thinking about a family down the road, and I'm thinking about people to provide for. And then my parents are getting a bit older, and it just, again, that mid-20s kind of crisis where I'm like, wow, like there's more to life than just trying to put myself through the bills. Like I have other people potentially, like how am I going to own a house? How am I going to support children and a family? And I think that was like the real wake up call for me, was like, this is not just for me anymore.
Would you say you have a strong why, sense of why? And I feel like they teach this in some of these investor seminars, because everyone can say, well, I want to be a 1%er. I want a 1%er wife. I want to be rich. Well, who doesn't? I want to be thin. I want to be beautiful. All these things. I want to be famous, right? But what you find is the people who truly are the 1%ers, there's like a work ethic. And I don't necessarily mean like you're grinding it out 18 hours a day, but there is a certain commitment to the why. Yeah. What's your why, if you don't mind sharing?
It's my family.
Yeah.
Truly, and it started with my husband, but then extrapolated out to my parents who were getting close to like retirement age.
I thought this was the case based on what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And, looking at like how much like they sacrificed to help me with my dream. Cause, these are people who like remortgaged a house to get me a national level competition horse. Like we didn't have that kind of money, like and I didn't find out until I was like in my 20s that when I was 18, they remortgaged their house so that I could
so you're probably to blame for, a certain level of stress that was put on your parents, right? That's stressful for a couple. Like finances, they always say, is like the most stressful thing for couples. So yeah. I guess you have a certain level of duty maybe that you want to give back.
Yeah. And I thought, this is a way that I have seen at that point, like all of these people like create wealth for themselves, like at these events and things. And as I was interacting with the real estate world, and I thought, this is it. Like I cannot survive like this anymore. Like I'm going into my late 20s, I want to start a family soon. My own family, like my parents are getting older. It's on me. If this is going to change, it has to start with me. And and I think people get too far like ahead of themselves. I did start small. I used to go to RAIN, every month, and then like other little networking groups. And what I did was I showed up with full intention. I didn't know how it was going to work. I didn't know where things were going to go at that point. I didn't have this clear direction yet, but I knew real estate was like a catalyst to get there. And I'm like, I just have to keep showing up and giving it away.
You go to these events, there's 400 people there.
Yeah.
What do you, and I know that not all 400 people are doing what you're doing.
That's right.
What do you think the biggest difference is between people like you who actually like took action versus the people who just went because they have the education, they have the know-how. That's right. They wrote in their notebook like the 4 steps that I need to take.
Yeah.
And then they went home and they didn't do it. Like
my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah. And I'm sure you hear it so many times. And I do as well. Like when I'm talking to real estate investors, it's next year and next time. And I must have missed this deal, but it's too late. And there's
excuses.
Yeah. There's these excuses. So like, what was the thing that made you do it? Obviously we talked about the why. Like I get that your why was strong and you were driven, but anything else you can kind of attribute to it? Like maybe something more tactical that you did that they might not be doing?
Like I definitely think like at some point you have to attach like even like a time limit or something on it to make you like kind of spur you to action. Cause for me, I was kind of like on my last legs. Like I had no option but to try to make this work. For a lot of people that go to these events, I think a lot of them are like 9-to-5ers that like have a good steady paycheck. And so
Like their back's not up against the wall.
exactly. So if they don't do it, what are the consequences? Maybe a lost opportunity, but it's not going to really like maybe impact them substantially. So they need to get themselves into a place where you have to visualize like, what am I sacrificing by not doing this? Like not financially, but like, did you miss your kids' piano recital? Like what about spending more time with your kids on their summer vacation? You know, things like that. You have to get yourself in a mindset where there's like urgency, where you have to say like, no, now is the time, not tomorrow, not 6 months from now. No more excuses. Like we're only, you know, getting older, like day by day. You have to just find a level of like urgency and commitment in yourself. And if it means getting more like personalized mentorship, like someone to kind of like guide you a bit more, because I think the problem with those big events too is they're very generic. You go, it's rah, you like learn a few things, but sometimes you literally need like that one person to just kind of like hold your hand almost and say, look, here's a few properties. Let's pull the trigger. Like, let's do this. And we're going to analyze the deals together and just nudge.
Yeah. Sometimes that hand holding is important, right? Like school is always interesting because it's kind of that safe playground, right? To test things where people are a little bit too scared to test things in the real world, particularly people who are like upper middle class. Like I think they feel like there's too much to lose.
That's right.
Right. It's like I have a decent life. I don't want to have a bad life, you know? But they also don't realize like they could have an amazing life. And so I think the opportunity cost of playing it safe is important there. Where can people find you? Like where, like they want to connect with you, they want to know more about your coaching or do a JV partnership with you. Where can they get a hold of you?
So I'm definitely easy to touch base with on social media. So my handle on Facebook and Instagram is at Sarah Eder Invest.
We'll be sure to put that in the comments. And I really appreciate you being so open and honest, sharing the conversation. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
And we'll see you guys next time.